Once about 16 years ago, give or take, my family and I lived on an island named Croatan. It was right off the coast of Honduras. It was my mother's country of origin, so we were moving there. And I was about 5 or 6 years old at that point. My older brother, had about a year and a half head start on me in life. But back then, that seemed like forever. So it was like a huge change for us too. It was a huge change. But thankfully, I was young enough to be able to adapt to that pretty easily. Um, but it was still like a whole new world. And I clung to things that stayed the same. The sort of things like my chunk glass, the useless American dollar bill that my dad kept in his wallet for some reason, um, my brother's blue sand bucket, and my mom's hat. And this was a hat that she's owned since before I was born. It's always been around. These sort of things were like constant reminders of like familiar things, and they were good visual reminders in the backdrop of like a changing world. They were my comforting silhouettes. So one day, us children were convinced to walk to the end of the beach to go to this dock. And I was excited to do this because we had just settled into this new island, and the prospect of exploring was making me like more happy about the whole thing. And it was a windy day. It was very windy, and the sand bit at the skin of our legs. But we didn't care too much. For once, we were just happy to be there. And when we reached the end of the dock, my brother and I went to peer over the edge because we liked to watch fish dart between the huge columns of seaweed. We would try to spot things like jellyfish or like seahorses and stuff. But right in that moment, a huge gust of wind suddenly blew by, and like we nearly teetered right into the water. Thankfully, my mom was there. She caught us by the end of her shirts and held us and stuff. And that was all great. But without her hand placed securely on top of her head to keep her hat there, the wind swept it away into the air. And I looked up in absolute horror at the dark silhouette of this hat against the sky, was in terror, and then it plopped gently into the water below us. And I immediately started like shouting, crying, and pointing at it. I was begging my mom to save it. I was just like, "Quick, you have to get it!" Like, oh my gosh! And I was convinced she must be as like distraught as me that her hat was gone. But after a few performative like "oh no's," all she did was like lean down and gently say to me like, "No, mi amor, I can't." And oh my gosh, this was just a horrible realization. Realization that like that we were not getting this hat back. I just started crying. I was so angry because it was so close and yet so far, and the thought of it being so close, just right there, not being allowed to be saved, I was just horrified. And so I started crying, and I became more and more hysterical as it floated farther and farther away. Very existential for me in that moment. And my brother was the same. He was looking at the hat, looking back at my mom, looking back at the hat, and like looking up at her, like, this can't be happening. Like he was just as upset as me. I was inconsolable. I thought it was over for me then. I was like, this is it. Um, but then we heard thumping of bare feet on wood suddenly, like coming up from behind us, and a shape blurred past me suddenly. And I looked up from my crying, what? And it was just in time to catch this lanky tween, like just throw himself, like arms, like legs flailing, like off the dock. And me and my brother watched in awe as like this kid, it looked just cut through the water, like he was a mermaid or something. Like he was, like it was just totally natural for him. He went all the way out, into the depths, of the water, and he just snatched up the hat and like turned victoriously back to the dock. And oh, he was heralded by our cheering. Like, we were amazed. And when, as he came up the ladder to go back onto the dock, my mom was thanking him profusely. Like, she's like, oh, thank God. Like, my kids were going crazy. And this kid, when he climbed up the dock, he climbed up to the dock. We saw that he was just like like a young small boy. He was like 12 or 13. And he was just super casual about it. He just handed me the hat, like the waterlogged hat, like it was nothing. And then he said, "Debe sido importante." Like, it must have been important to you. And he just waved off my mom's thank yous as we walked off the dock. And meanwhile, I was like clutching the hat, like I just nearly lost a friend or something. Near death experience for me. And we reached the end of the dock, and he scooped up his shoes that he had, probably thrown off before he went to dive in. And without another word, he just walked right back down the beach. He just continued his walk. And in that moment, like, my brother and I looked on after him. And in that moment, and even today, honestly, that was the coolest. That was the coolest guy ever. He was cooler than any superhero. And I think that was when a good solid image of like the kind of person I wanted to be solidified in my head. Like, that was when I was like, yeah, that's the kind of person I want to be. So, very um, important memory, important memory for me. Is hey, if you're out there, dude, thanks. You know, small little thing, but I would say that those small little memories is what makes a person. And you became one of those things for me. So, thank you.